Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith. About a month ago we took a look at Canon's new Rebel T7i. I gave you sort of like a first sort of initial preview. At that time I was not able to even post any samples because I was dealing with the pre-production unit. However, now I finally have my hands on the final version of the Rebel T7i. Is this latest Rebel worth getting excited about? Is it actually something that's worth it over the existing T6i? Stick around and we'll take a closer look. Okay guys, so you may remember from my previous video that one of the main things I was excited about on the newer T7i is that we have Canon's dual pixel Cmos Autofocus. My goodness, I feel like I need a medal for saying that correctly. Basically, that autofocus technology means that we have very fast and smooth autofocus in video mode. The older T6i used a hybrid system, so we had some contrast detect area and some phase detect area. On this new T7i though, just like its bigger brother, the 80D, we have the ability to have phase detect autofocus points across the entire sensor, so we get much better focus performance in live view and in video. I was also very excited that they finally included 1080p at 60 frames per second. And we also have a new menu interface to look at too, which I find to be particularly beginner friendly. Let's go ahead and take a look at this camera close up and I'll show you how all this comes together. Taking a closer look at the Canon Rebel T7i, you guys will notice that we have a new lens now. This lens is a little bit smaller than the lens it replaces. There is a difference in aperture. It's not really much to make a difference in my opinion. I mean, it's like a f4 to f5.6 instead of being 3.5 on the wide end. Not a huge deal, but it is smaller and lighter, and I think that will probably make a bigger difference for most users. It also still retains the same fast autofocusing ability. Now this camera features Canon's new dual Cmos autofocus technology that we first saw on other cameras like the 80D and the 70D before that. This is the first time we've had it on a Rebel. I tested this kind of compared to the Rebel T6i. I didn't see a huge difference in terms of usability or speed, but the new focus system does seem to be much more smooth. So I don't know guys, what do you think? Is there a difference? Let me know in the comments below. While we're on the topic of autofocus, this camera also benefits from a new autofocus system as well in terms of our viewfinder shooting. If you look at the focus system here, we actually have 45 autofocus points now. And basically, from what I can tell, this is a similar focus system to the one found in the 80D. So definitely a big improvement there. All these points are extremely sensitive, which is nice as well. And we have a few different options we can use on that. Canon, they've also given this camera the new Digic 7 processor. That gives us a little bit of a bump in terms of our frame rate. So now we can actually do up to 6 frames a second. So we're a little bit faster there, which is nice. We also get a little bit more high ISO performance. I have some test samples for you guys to look at in the description below on that. This is not really an official comparison video, but I felt it appropriate to kind of compare this to the T6i prior, because it's kind of hard to see otherwise how we have improved on things. One of the absolute first things I noticed about this camera whenever I turn it on is how the menu interface looks. I love how now whenever we go through all of our different scene modes, we get sort of a stock image to give us an idea of what type of effect we can expect. But we also get a little description here too. So if we hit this drop down, we can see a little description there, and it kind of tells us what the camera is going to do in a given scene mode. This is going to be something that a lot of people just starting out are going to find extremely handy. The biggest news on this mode though is after we go in here and we select one of these, so I'm going to go ahead and select portrait, I'll hit OK. The biggest thing now is that you actually have the ability to override some of the automatic functions. So now instead of just taking photos in this scene mode, you can actually go in here and override things like your flash use, and even you can even go in and make your photograph brighter or darker. So if I come in here, I can use the Q button on the touchscreen and select an option, or I can use the physical Q button, either way. So I can select that flash there. I could turn that off, leave it on automatic, or I can even go in here and change my drive modes. And I like how they give us our exposure compensation in this mode. Now, if I'm a beginner and I just picked up a camera, I'm not really going to know what exposure compensation is. But on this camera, you'll notice that it simply denotes it in these modes as brightness. And we can go brighter or we can go darker. So much, much easier and more intuitive for the beginning photographer. In addition to all the standard scene modes, this camera also has a SCN setting on the mode dial. This is basically where you have a lot more specialized scene modes. I'm not going to go through all these, but I did notice one in particular here that I wanted to show you guys, and that is the group photo scene mode. Now, if you are kind of a camera nerd, you may remember back a long time ago, Canon had an option called ADEP, which allowed you to basically set how much you want it to be in focus in your image. This group photo mode essentially does the same thing as that older ADEP mode. As you grow as a photographer and you start to explore more of the manual settings on the camera, you'll notice that the camera actually continues to help you out there too. If we go over to full manual, of course we still see that we have the same description here. But if we go over and select this option, you'll notice that as we look at our different settings, the camera kind of gives you an idea about what's going on. One thing that I always tell photographers starting out whenever they're shooting is that if you're shooting handheld, you shouldn't go below about a 60th of a second. I love how this camera actually has a sort of gray zone here. And sure enough, it's just below a 60th of a second. Also, I find that photographers find themselves going to the extremes on the aperture setting. You know, they stop way down or they open way up. This camera actually has another little gray zone there that's right north of f11 to kind of remind you that that's more of an extreme zone. So it continues to guide you throughout this entire process. If we head on into the menu here, we'll notice that we actually have everything sort of subdivided here as well. I like how everything is very logically laid out. Sony, they definitely need to like sort of maybe steal some of Canon's UI engineers or something. As we select one of these options here, you can see that we have pretty much the same type of interface we saw on previous Canon models. Now, if you decide that you don't like this new sort of setup, it is possible to revert to Canon's old menu system. If we go over to our display and level settings here, we can actually come in here and we can change things. So if you don't like this sort of guided approach, if you're the sort of photographer that knows what's up with all these settings, you can revert back to Canon's standard user interface and not have all this come on if you would rather that. So yeah, we can actually go in here and disable all these different things if we wanted to. And we basically have the same sort of interface we're used to. But if you are a new photographer starting out, the default settings right out of the box will no doubt make things much, much easier for you. Okay guys, so that pretty much does it for this video. A couple other features that I didn't mention that are changes on the T7i include a slightly higher flash sync speed. So now we can go up to 1/250th of a second when we're using flash versus 1/200th. You may have also noticed that I kind of sort of skipped over Canon's new handy little button for the wireless connectivity. And I did mention that this camera also has Bluetooth built in. Now, I kind of did that on purpose at this point because I will be making a video in the future talking about the Wi-Fi. Another thing I'll be talking about in the future is how this camera compares to the Nikon D5600. Obviously, we had things, things were so close between the T6i and the 5600. There's definitely going to be a rematch between this T7i and the 5600. Aside from that though, guys, what else would you like to see me test with this new camera? Write me in the comments below. As you guys know, I love reading all the feedback, and that helps me know what type of content I should produce. Definitely be sure to follow me on social media. I'm known by my very unique username of PhotogJ the Great. I'll tell you guys one day how I came up with that username, but not today. Until next time, guys, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off.